After Odim facilitates Geralt's escape, our Witcher goes to meet Odim one way or the other, and we find out several interesting things through our dialogue with him. For example, Odim can't stand spells. He calls them childish hocus-pocus and uninteresting. He's far more interested in true tales of human lives. We also know he adores curiosity. I think we've established him as a very powerful being enough now, but then why does he only gamble for souls? It's not power, he has plenty of that. Hard to tell, as everything is about this man, but I believe that by collecting a person's soul, he collects their memories, their experiences. Odim is curious, very curious, about everything, but especially people and what makes them tick. It's obvious that he can have whatever else he wants easily, except for souls. Knowledge and experience isn't something you simply conjure up. The first Witchers were created around 950. That's roughly 300 years before the events of Hearts of Stone. Nothing for a creature such as Odim, so he might not have come across anyone with knowledge of Witcher mutations yet. Secondly, we learn that Geralt and Odim don't truly have a pact just yet. It's likely that this is because Geralt never signed a contract, especially not in blood. Odim isn't stupid, of course. He knows full well that Geralt, as an experienced Witcher, would realize the consequences of signing a contract like that, especially one signed in blood. As we've established that he's already been following Geralt for quite some time and knows plenty about him from Dandelion's ballads. So he opted for an oral agreement instead. Less potent, perhaps, but more of a deal of honor. Odim asks Geralt for his help, and in return he will remove the mark on his face, and in addition he'll grant Geralt a boon of his choice by the end of their deal. We know that Odim likely needs one as skilled as Geralt to complete the pact. After all, Olgierd hints at there having been previous attempts, and they've all failed. But Geralt, of course, finds this a little too generous, and asks if he's sure that's all he wants from him. Odim answers with,
just one. Honesty.
Honesty. We keep coming back to this. Gaunter never lies. He twists his words, but he never lies. He mentions later on that he's no cheat. He gives folk what they want, nothing more. That they oft desire unworthy things, that is entirely the fault of their rotten natures. He seems to genuinely dislike evil people. So when he describes Olgierd as a degenerate monster in human flesh who feeds on the pain and suffering of others, while you might find it a clever allegory to Odim himself, I believe we can take his word for it. Olgierd is a terrible man. And so, Geralt agrees to act as Odim's proxy in fulfilling Olgierd's 3 impossible wishes. Because they are, technically, all impossible. Except for one like Geralt, of course, especially with Odim gently pushing him into the right direction where needed. And Geralt is seemingly followed by Gaunter wherever he goes, just to make sure he doesn't stray from the path, so to speak. Now, in our dealings with Olgierd, we see how much he actually lies at all. Of course, he deceived Geralt before by not telling him the toad was a cursed prince, but now he again tries to willfully deceive us through the phrasing of his wishes. The house he asks for is not really a house, even though he prefaces the wish with, "We're without a roof over our head, so why not start with that?" That could be considered an outright lie. His brother was obviously already dead, and so was Iris and the rose he gave her. We found out he lied to Vladimir, his own beloved brother, on the reason he died. When he tells Geralt on why he wishes to find and torment Eric Dubois, he states that it's because the Lord called him a whoreson and threatened him. But we can read this letter, and nowhere does he ever use something even remotely like that word. But even outside of the lies, the plundering, and other such matters, Olgierd is also a racist, calling the Ophiri prince a mutt and stating that his kind doesn't deserve to live. I somehow doubt the Ophiri saber Olgierd told us was a gift was truly a gift either. But let's have a look at Olgierd's wishes. The bank heist is quite straightforward. a matter of revenge. Horst Borsodi was the main reason the von Everecks became impoverished, and Olgierd wanted to pay them back. Geralt was to grab an item called Maximilian Borsodi's house and bring it to Olgierd. The aim for Olgierd, however, was not the house itself, but the papers within. A will which would allow him to ruin the Borsodi family. The second wish was to entertain Olgierd's dead brother, which Geralt achieved by summoning his spirit and allowing him to inhabit his body to go to the wedding with Shani. The third wish had Geralt go to the old von Everec estate to bring Olgierd the rose he gave Iris all those years ago. Geralt succeeded only through some help from the two familiars summoned by Olgierd to keep Iris company. Familiars that were seemingly bound to Iris's spirit rather than a regular summon. They took the shape of a cat and a dog, but it's highly likely they shape-shifted into humans at one point during Iris's life as well, as the table in present day is set for 3 people, not one person, a cat and a dog, as we see in the painted world. These 2 demons, because they are demons, did seem to know the Man of Glass, however, and even gave Geralt a hint on how to beat him. Which is a curious thing indeed. Just like Odim, these 2 also rather keep their names to themselves. Now, Odim's name might drive one mad upon hearing it, of course, but as there are more demons that don't want their name known, perhaps there's more to it. In many religions, it is believed that knowing a demon's name grants one power over them. That's as good a reason as any not to tell a person. Regardless, after these tasks are complete, Geralt returns to the Alchemy Inn to find Olgierd's henchman, but instead he finds Odim, casually sitting on a table and waving you over. But after a drunken man bothers Geralt as he walks towards Odim, Master Mirror claps his hands and time freezes. As it turns out, the Man of Glass is not quite done with Geralt yet. Phrasing, it seems, has led to one final request. Geralt is to invite Olgierd to meet him at the Temple of Lilvani, and only then will their deal have ended. However, before Geralt leaves to do just that, Olgierd's man tells him that Shani had come by, asking for Geralt. Shani, you see, had been doing some digging on the Olgierd-Odim situation. As it turns out, after failing to find a remedy himself, Olgierd had asked a professor for help in dealing with Odim. Professor Shakeslock. And this man is a treasure trove of knowledge indeed. Instead of asking, Geralt decides to break into the professor's house in Oxenfurt and finds a few things of note before even talking to Shakeslock. On the top floor, we find an item called a lamen. Geralt notes that he doesn't recognize the sigil, and it hadn't been used in ages. A lamen, you see, is a general term for a magical pendant generally used to command authority and magic. The item would show the sigil of the spirit one wished to command as a sort of coat of arms. And, curiously, a lamen was also used to invoke spirits of the Key of Solomon, powerful demons of hell. In this same room we find a book titled Gillian Alboco's Lesser Key, a clear reference to the Key of Solomon, of course. It's very likely that in his research, Professor Shakeslock had come upon the sigil of none other than Gaunter Odim. And he had tried to summon him, bind him to his will, failing, of course. But Odim does show himself at that point. The professor had come too close and Gaunter had to step in. He binds a demon to the house and draws a magical circle on the floor alongside several runes. Within the circle, the demon wouldn't harm him, but step 1 foot outside of it and he would inevitably die. And with that, Gaunter left. Going by the Lesser Key theory, this particular magical circle seems most similar to the first pentacle of Mercury. This pentagram conveys personal magnetism upon its owner. Ironic, really. The poor man is also tormented in his dreams by Master Mirror, until at last he has quite lost the will to live. And the moment Geralt has the information he needs, a series of unfortunate events lead to the professor falling outside of the circle and immediately dying. It's almost like Odim knew this might happen. If Geralt is careless enough to blow out the candles in the pentagram as well, the demon bound to the house is also released into the wild. And Geralt now knows that Gaunter can be challenged to his own game of riddles. After bringing Olgierd to the temple of Lilvani, it is revealed that Lilvani was in fact a moon goddess, and the mosaic on the temple grounds depicted a moon, thus fulfilling the final clause to the pact, that Odin and Olgierd would stand together on the moon. Now you could of course allow Odin to simply take Olgierd's soul. True to his word, Geralt will then be able to request a boon from him, one that seems to come with no strings attached. But one could also attempt to save Olgierd. Geralt challenges Odin to a battle of wits. If he loses, Odin can take both Geralt's and Olgierd's soul. But if he wins, both men go free. Master Mirror agrees and teleports Geralt to a world of his own making, where he is presented with a riddle. To all things and men I appertain, and yet by some am shunned and disdained. Fondle and ogle me till you're insane, but no blow can harm me, cause me pain. Children delight in me, elders take fright, fair maids rejoice and spin. Cry and I weep, yawn and I sleep, smile and I shall grin. What am I? The answer, of course, is a reflection. Throughout Odin's world you are tempted constantly by a shiny sword, Shani falling off a ridge and crying out for help, a cave filled with treasures and plenty of false leads, not to mention monsters. In the end, Geralt finds a mirror which shatters, and then more mirrors that also shatter upon approaching them, until we eventually stumble upon a source of water, and our reflection there simply can't be broken. Master Mirror backs away into the void, clapping slowly, assuring us that he is not defeated. He can't be killed, and he will be back. He truly doesn't look entirely too bothered. And, well, why would he? What Gaunter seems to want is excitement, adventure, new tales to tell, new things to learn. And he got just that, didn't he? And he'll be back as soon as someone turns to him for help again. And that'll eventually happen. But what about the contract then, you might ask? Well, Gaunter Odin is no novice. He's been bested once before, that we know of, I should say, so he no doubt takes it into account when he does what he does best, punishing the wicked. Because that is what he does. He does it in the worst possible way with a great many innocent victims, but it is what he does. And he doesn't always ask for a soul either. The Spoon Lady was cursed for being selfish, forced to never eat food, to be alone and appear a hideous monster. But Gaunter didn't want her soul. He merely punished her for her selfish act. And what happens when you break the curse? She comes out a better person, more humble, more kind. But she has lost everyone she has ever loved. What happens to Olgierd when you break him out of his contract? His heart melts. He is able to feel once more. He is able to feel his loss. Iris, Vladimir, the two people he loved more than life itself, were both gone. And he was responsible. He says it best himself.
I've a heart again. Yet all it feels is grief, sadness, and defeat. My life is a ruin.
The camera focuses on a broken statue of Lilvani for a moment, before Olgierd hands Geralt his beloved sword. Perhaps he's decided to leave the bandit life and atone through religion. He certainly won't be doing much fighting without a sword, but that won't even be the last of it. In an earlier conversation, Geralt remarks on Olgierd's misbehavior during his immortal life, noting that he must have made quite a few enemies along the way, and that maybe not today and not tomorrow, but someday someone would find a way to take him down. It doesn't trouble Olgierd then because he feels nothing, but now he does. He can now be killed. He can now feel fear. It's unlikely Olgierd will be able to take as much as a step into most towns without being recognized and immediately executed in a horrible way. And if not, Olgierd will at the very least have to live a pious life for the rest of his days, atoning for the horrible things he's done in life, remembering all he's lost. Odim always wins. And that's a bad thing, right? Well, I'm not so sure, actually. We know that Odim and Olgierd's story was based on the Twardowski legend in large parts, right down to the standing on the moon clause. In Twardowski's legend, the alchemist named Twardowski makes a deal with the devil to gain fame, fortune, and great magical knowledge. He tries to trick the devil by including a clause in the contract that states he may only take his soul once Twardowski stands in Rome. He taunted the devil to no end for quite some time, until the devil tricks him into visiting an inn called Rome, and the contract is fulfilled. Twardowski, in most versions of the tale, then escapes to the moon somehow before being dragged off to hell entirely. So then you might say, alright, that means Odim is the devil, right? I mean, each time he's appeared at any point, someone's even mentioned the devil right after. But remember that this is the world of The Witcher. Nothing is so black and white. Or, in the words of a certain elf,
shades of grey, I think.
We know Odim isn't simply a demon or a djinn, because Geralt asks him whether he is directly. But these creatures are known to men, and Odim warns him that he can't tell him what he really is, as it will harm Geralt. We can conclude thus that he is at least neither demon nor djinn. At least not entirely. Remember, Odim never lies. But what about those first 3 letters we talked about at the very beginning? God. So, is he God then? A god at least? Still doesn't seem quite right. Whatever else you might think of a god of any kind, the ones we worship willingly are generally benign. Their rules revolve around the good in the world, being kind to one another and such things. However, I do believe Gaunter is in a sense linked to God. Remember, even the nicest gods still punish the sinners. But I believe Gaunter would work more as his reflection. You might know the saying, the brightest light casts the longest shadow. They could be 2 sides of the same coin. Remember his name, Master Mirror? We find a broken mirror in both Professor Shakeslock and the Spoon Lady's house. Gaunter Odim is not evil incarnate. That's a moniker given to him by humans. A most unreliable narrator because they only see one side. In the German fable A Heart of Stone, a man down on his luck meets the glass man, a benevolent spirit who helps him out of his predicament as best he can, even though the man makes terrible wishes. He even saves him from the devil in the end, the devil who turned the man's heart to stone. Gaunter Odim, the man of glass, is seen in both the evil and the good side of this story, because he is just that. The mirrors are broken because Gaunter brought out their inner self. In the mirror, they would see themselves for the monster they are. The Spoon-White sees a monstrous visage of herself, though she thought herself so pretty. The professor can't see anything at all, because he was blinded by greed. And just like that, Gaunter will mirror whoever it is he's dealing with. Throughout our meetings with him, we realize that the worse a person is, the worse Odim will treat them. The 2 cursed cases we know of directly, Marlene de Trastamara, the Spoon Lady, was bad but not bad enough to go after her soul. Olgierd was a monster with no regard for the lives of others, so he was punished very harshly, with no real way for a happy ending. But Geralt, well, you would say a Witcher's soul might make a fine addition to the Devil's collection, and I'm sure he could have found a way for Geralt to sign such a contract somehow, by using Ciri or Yennefer, some of his good friends perhaps. But he didn't. Instead, he first helps Geralt find Yennefer, and though he might have needed the Witcher to help him break Olgierd, he never once cheats him. He never once attempts to trick Geralt. He even gives him a fabulous reward, should he choose to. And then he just leaves. During the wedding you attend alongside Shani, Gaunter even gives you a man-to-man pep talk on how to woo women, entirely free of charge. Because Geralt is not exactly evil, and Gaunter reflects your soul. When a victim of Odin survives somehow, they always emerge a more humble being. The Laman we find in Shakeslock House that we considered might be holding Gaunter's sigil also looks a great deal like a Triskelion, or a Triskele, the triple spiral that is often shown as the symbol of eternity, or the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But, as said, the world is colored in shades of grey. Gaunter is never wholly evil, even if he is quite evil. Gaunter is chaos, with a special dislike for liars. He quite literally does what he wants, with very little regard to the consequences for other people. He wants to see his game play out, that's the end goal. If he believes you deserve to be punished, he will observe for a while, and then decide the best or most fun way to hit you where it hurts, even if that means a great deal of collateral damage. Remember, like the cat and dog demon, Odin likely has no real concept of human emotion. He doesn't feel like we do. To us, that means he's evil, but to him, it's strictly business. But if his observations reveal that you are in fact an honest person, I'd wager he'll leave well enough alone and moves on to the next person. While he doubtlessly has his own set of rules, we can't ever hope to discover what those are unless he tells us, which we know he won't. He is perhaps closest to the gods found in Hinduism or Brahmanism, where it is believed that there is in fact no devil. There is a hell, certainly, but one damns oneself by deviance of their own will, and one can only be redeemed through death. Gaunter is that hell, the one some would so willingly subject themselves to. The man of glass torments the professor for finding out too much about him, but he also seems to frown upon the disregard shown to vagrants and beggars of the world, as you can practically taste his annoyance when he tells you,
Yes, as a vagrant, I deserve no explanation.
He asks Vladimir to leave nicely at first. Only when he refuses to honor his deal does Odin resort to torture, seemingly threatening him with a hell of his own making. He also seems quite interested in holy objects, as he apparently bought the golden chalice of Reverend Michaelis off the thieving dwarves we meet on the Isle of Mist. And this may very well be a reference to the Holy Grail. And, speaking of those dwarves, how did they get themselves to the Isle of Mist? They said they bought a magic firefly, said to know the way to a hidden treasure. Now, in general, people don't walk around carrying magical fireflies to a hidden isle on a daily basis. The firefly we used to get to the isle was conjured up by an elven sage, a very powerful one at that. We know the isle isn't Gaunter's doing because he says he can't meddle with it. So who gave them the firefly? Well, the ship captain that tricks a group of thieves onto an Isle of Mist. Remember when we theorized about a possible enemy of Odin? What if this particular trickster doesn't rightly care to make deals, gather souls, only to play tricks, specifically on Gaunter? Odin seems to have some sort of code, a method to the madness, so to speak. But there's no telling how many entities like him roam our world and what their rules are, if even they have any. Because of course there is no treasure on the Isle of Mist, only death. The dwarves lose several men to the monsters and the shipwreck. Then they steal Geralt's boat and make for the mainland again, where they steal the golden chalice and sell it to a Mr. Mirrory. Now, there really isn't much to go on in this case, and I have several theories on what happened, and this is but one of them. Perhaps you have one of your own. I believe that Gaunter pushed the dwarves towards stealing the chalice. As they say, they were on the way from Skellige to Novigrad, which is where the chalice is. On the way there, a ship captain instead sells them a magical firefly out of the blue that would supposedly send them on a treasure hunt, but really it traps them on the Isle of Mist, of course. If we assume this captain was an enemy of Master Mirror, this was solely meant to throw them off the path Odin had set for them. It's only through Geralt that the dwarves find a way off the island, allowing them to steal the chalice. Assuming it's correct, of course, as it's only a theory. That'd be an interesting cat and mouse play to follow. In the end, we can never be truly sure, of course. But I don't believe we've seen the only incarnation of Odim. I believe that if one lives an honest life, one would never meet Odim to begin with. I don't believe the face he showed us is his true form, and I do believe that we may see him again someday indeed.